Hello friends, I have to tell you all about C60 Purple Power. Since I started using C60, which may be the most powerful antioxidant known to man, I feel amazing, and you should too. I have more energy, I sleep better, and I've lost over 30 pounds. But please go check it out for yourself. It has so many amazing benefits. Just click the link in the description or visit c60purplepower.com and use coupon code KNOWLEDGE10 to get 10% off your order plus free shipping. That's C60 Purple Power. Welcome back to the Forbidden News Update. I'm Chris Matthew. With me as usual is Cory Hughes. Cory, how you doing today?
Good, thank you.
Well, we have got some very important information that Cory's compiled as usual that we're going to go over today. Before we do that, I do want to thank My Patriot Supply. With the craziness going on our planet, it couldn't hurt to have an emergency food supply. Check them out. They are the experts in emergency preparedness. Right now, you can get $70 off a 2-week supply and $100 off a 4-week of their nutritious food that stays good up to 25 years in storage. Just click the link in the description or visit preparewithfkn.com right now to get your supply today. I want to thank everyone, especially that donated. We really appreciate it. It has helped us so much in our transition. We just finished our relocation. If you'd like to continue to help us in our process, the links are in the description to make a donation. We're building a brand new home studio. It's going to be awesome. We're waiting for some supplies to come in. That's going to be very cool. You're going to see a lot of cool changes coming up, a lot of great improvements, and some very fun things that are upcoming for Forbidden Knowledge News. Now, unfortunately, due to the move, I haven't been really catching up with some of the global events that have been going on, but there are a few things that I wanted to say before I turn it over to Cory. He does have some very important stuff to present as usual. Now, from what I've seen in the mainstream media, it really wouldn't matter what kind of evidence Trump and his attorneys present. They've already declared Biden president. To me, the question of if Trump was even genuine or just playing his part doesn't even matter anymore. I don't think it mattered in the first place. That's one of the reasons I don't have any faith in our political system. In my opinion, all the presidents have been selected and they've been used as talking heads. And what we need to focus on now is what's coming, because there is no one that's going to come and save us. The media, they seem to have already started to zoom away from the Trump show and have gone immediately back to the coronavirus agenda, spreading fear, mask mandates, lockdowns are starting again. I have a feeling we're going to have another, wipe down like we've seen last year, but this may be the final nail in the coffin of our economy. Yes, there is something going around that's killing people. It's killing older folks. It's having weird, strange effects on other people. We still don't know exactly what the hell this COVID-19, COVID-20, whatever you want to call it, whatever the hell it is, we don't know what it is. And from the information that Cory and many other researchers, doctors, and scientists have put out, there are different strains that are definitely 100% engineered. And that being said, there are dozens of identifiable agendas unfolding behind this coronavirus situation, these lockdowns and all the fear tactics. Big tech and corporate entities are taking over everything right now. We're going to be run by these big tech, draconian interests. You know, some of these companies like Google, Facebook, Twitter, they don't like when alternative media outlets like us talk about anything that goes against the mainstream narrative. Free speech, in my opinion, it's already gone. It's just a matter of time before it'll be considered maybe illegal to even talk about certain topics. And I really hate that conspiracy theorists have actually been right about our future. You know, this is the future that we've been warned about by so many people, and so few people have actually listened to it. But in 2020, more people started listening. More people started realizing that we've been lied to our entire lives, and more people aren't falling for bullshit anymore. The problem is they really did a good job putting us to sleep with the media mind control, pharmaceuticals, our shitty food and water, and everything else people are taking in every day. And it took so long for people to see this. Now we're already in this very deep hole, and it seems impossible for most people to get out of this hole. But we need to start somewhere. And I always say, starting with yourself, trying to make improvements around you and your community is where to start. And that's just based on my own personal experiences. And also from my own personal experiences, fear is what kept me from doing the things that I wanted to do. Once I could get past that and take the first step, as long as I thought and I felt with all of my heart that I was doing the right thing, the next step got easier, and everything starts to fall into place. So I know as long as I'm doing what I think is right and fulfilling whatever I consider to be a purpose, that I'm going to be okay at the least. And I know that there's a portion of my audience that really knows about the power of positive thinking and even manifesting reality. And there are many of you that think it's all just woo-woo spiritual bullshit, and that's perfectly fine. I love all of my audience. I have a huge audience. You know, they disagree, they agree. I cover all kinds of stuff. It's what worked for me. All I know is that when I'm doing good things tend to come back to me. And if I'm a shitty person, shitty things tend to happen to me. So I know many of you have also experienced the same thing. And my final thought from all this, I guess, is that there's so few that are at the top that control everything, and there are so many more of us. And I really think that they need to be reminded just how outnumbered they are. I don't think that it's too late to change our course. A lot of people think it is, but I think we need to get as many as possible that really want to make this change. But there's still a much larger portion of our population that's willing to go along with anything they're told to do. And as long as they're told by the media, and as long as they keep doing that, the less of a chance we're going to have. So just pay close attention to information coming from alternative media sources like us. Support alternative media sources like us. And, you know, Cory, he's going to help us understand some of the things going on today with this information. So with that being said, Cory, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to you.
All right. So we're fucked. And let me go ahead and demonstrate to you why we're fucked. All right. Screen share.
Oh, let me just allow that for you. There you go. And that always makes me feel good whenever your opening statement is we're fucked. So thank you for that again.
So, of course, upgrade to the new Mac OS and it resets all of my settings. So give me 2 seconds and I'll have this worked out.
All right, no problem. Stand by. So give us the gist of what you have to present. while you're kind of.
Sure. Um, well, basically, we're hearing a lot of different things about coronavirus. We're not hearing anything about its origins. There's a lot of conflicting information out there, and we all know what that means. And well, I'm going to go over some little known research papers done by some teams of biologists. I don't even know what the hell these people are. The level of specialty in their work is unreal. But ultimately, they have identified 3 different strains of coronaviruses that are not mutations. They're 3 separate strains, and all of them have been altered in the lab and inserted with various amounts of HIV at key spike receptors. So that being said, I'm going to go ahead and have to quit and come back in to reboot my settings. I'll be right back with you. All right. So I've titled this one, Genome Irregularities Indicate SARS-CoV of Synthetic Origin. Now I'm going to just preface this by stating this stuff is way above my pay grade, okay? I'm going to present research from 3 different teams, or 2 different teams, confirmed by a third, which is the most important, that COVID-19, based on their examination of the genome and its evolution over time, what we're seeing now is definitely laboratory produced. So, uncanny similarities of unique inserts in the 2019 nCoV spike protein to HIV-1, GP120, and GAG. And this was published on January 31st, 2020. It was published by an Indian team of researchers who were since forced to pull their paper. So this initial paper that identified the uncanny similarities of these inserts with HIV, they were forced to retract their paper. This is just a screenshot of the from the website indicating who they are. All right, abstract. We are currently witnessing a major epidemic caused by the 2019 novel coronavirus 2019 nCoV. The evolution of 2019 nCoV remains elusive. We found 4 insertions in the spike glycoprotein, which are unique to the 2019 nCoV and are not present in other coronaviruses. Importantly, amino acid residue in all the 4 inserts have identity or similarity to those in HIV-1, GP120, or HIV-1 GAG. Interestingly, despite the inserts being discontinuous on the primary amino acid sequence, 3D modeling of the 2019 nCoV suggests that they converge to constitute the receptor binding site. The finding of 4 unique inserts in the 2019 nCoV, all of which have identity similarity to amino acid residues in key structural proteins of HIV-1, is unlikely to be fortuitous in nature. This work provides yet unknown insights on 2019 nCoV and sheds light on the evolution and pathogenicity of this virus, with important implications for diagnosis of this virus. So basically, what does that say? That says that they found spliced into, at key receptor points, spliced into a typical coronavirus, 4 different inserts of HIV-1. Introduction
Now,
to viruses. Go ahead.
whenever you say they've spliced in inserts, that doesn't mean that everybody now has HIV, right?
No, from what I've read, those the inserts of HIV are non-contagious. The way that the sequencing works surrounding them, they're not contagious, but what they do is they allow for much easier access and binding to human receptor cells, right? So like I said, this is way above my pay grade. I'm doing my best to interpret this for the audience. But by splicing these segments of HIV, and as we'll see later, multiple strains of HIV, it makes binding to human receptors much easier. And another thing that I read in regards to this was that some people are losing their sense of smell and their sense of taste, but they're not really getting sick, right? Well, what's happening is because of at least in the beginning, it was so aggressive in how it bound to these human receptors that it actually fried out nerve endings. And that's why people were losing their sense of smell and sense of taste. So coronaviruses are single-stranded positive sense RNA viruses that infect animals and humans. These are classified into 4 genera based on their host specificity: alpha coronavirus, beta coronavirus, delta coronavirus, and gamma coronavirus. There are several known types of COVs that include 229E and NL63, genus alpha coronavirus, a whole bunch of other ones that I'm not going to go ahead and read out to you. While 229E, NL63, OC43, and HKU1 commonly infect humans, the SARS and MERS outbreak in 2002 and 2012 respectively occurred when the virus crossed over from animals to humans, causing significant mortality. In December 2019, another outbreak of coronavirus was reported from Wuhan, China, that also transmitted from animals to humans. This new virus has been temporarily termed as 2019 novel coronavirus by the World Health Organization. While there are several hypotheses about the origin of 2019 nCoV, the source of this ongoing outbreak remains elusive. So basically, to skip to their results, what they found was our phylogenetic tree of full-length coronaviruses suggests that 2019 nCoV is closely related to SARS-CoV-1. All right, that we've been researching since, or at least Ralph Barrick has been researching since 2015 at the University of North Carolina, which actually kind of, there are some connections between Fauci and the University of North Carolina. I think it's too coincidental that Fauci is then connected to Wuhan through funding, and also the University of North Carolina, where they've been working on this thing for 5 years already. So in addition, other recent studies have linked 2019 nCoV to SARS-CoV. We therefore compare the spike glycoprotein sequence of the 2019 nCoV to that of SARS-CoV, which is SARS-CoV-1, and this is the data bank number. On careful examination of the sequence alignment, we found that the 2019 nCoV spike glycoprotein contains 4 insertions. To further investigate if these insertions are present in any other coronavirus, we performed a multiple sequence alignment of the spike glycoprotein amino acid sequences of all available coronaviruses. We found that these 4 insertions are unique to 2019 nCoV and are not present in other coronaviruses analyzed. Another group from China had documented 3 insertions, comparing fewer spike glycoprotein sequences. Another group from China also found 3. Right, so you have multiple teams in China alone finding that these insertions are present that were not present in any previous coronavirus. They came up with a kind of chart to show the various influences of all the different coronaviruses, and I zoomed in on it. So basically, this is kind of like the evolutionary path. It's got like a little bit of all these in it. And so to zoom in one particular like corner of it, you've got Middle East respiratory syndrome, bat coronavirus isolate, which is what they've been working on since 2015, the Wuhan seafood market pneumonia virus isolate. Okay, so this strain or mutation or whatever it is of CoV2 is not the Wuhan seafood market pneumonia virus. Okay, it's 2 different things. And then you have SARS coronavirus, and so this is an evolution of all these things. Over here, you can see a whole nother like wing of coronaviruses and where they came from sparrow, magpie robin, white-eye coronavirus. I haven't even heard of these things before.
Yeah, with all this seemingly engineered material going into this, and you combine that with big tech's interest in this upcoming vaccine, it makes you, have to scratch your head and wonder what the hell is really going on underneath all this. You hear talk of the, some kind of RNA being used for the vaccine, and all kinds of craziness involving, technology basically that could be possibly integrated into what they want to use for these vaccines.
Yes, and this thing goes rather deep. Like there was a story that came out in March about Harvard and Yale and a couple of these Ivy League schools that failed to report something to the tune of $8.5 billion worth of money given to them by China, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, like a whole bunch of these foreign countries have been giving money to these skull and bones type schools. And one of the key people involved in that was a researcher involved with nanotechnology. So I sense there's a connection there. I'll have to do a lot more digging into that one. But here you can see on this chart the various inserts that are not natural. You'll see a lot of articles attempting to debunk this information, but at this point, you've got a half a dozen teams minimum that I'm aware of that have come to the same conclusions. So here you can see 1, 2, 4 different inserts. As we'll go over later, another team found that it was actually 3 different strains of HIV and 1 strain of what's called SIV, which I have a feeling is HIV, but like in some sort of animal group. All right, so we then translated the aligned genome and found that these inserts are present in all Wuhan 2019 nCoV virus except the 2019 nCoV virus of bat as a host, right? So the strain that they've been working on for years, the difference is that it has these extra sequences spliced in. Intrigued by the 4 highly conserved inserts unique to 2019 nCoV, we wanted to understand their origin. For this purpose, we used the 2019 nCoV local alignment with each insert as query against all virus genomes and considered hits with 100% sequence coverage. Surprisingly, each of the 4 inserts aligned with short segments of the human immunodeficiency virus proteins, HIV-1. So this thing, without question, has HIV spliced into it.
It's funny how they never come up with an HIV vaccine yet. The race for this vaccine is on, and a few countries have already got it 90-something%.
Yeah, and so well, it's a totally different type of vaccine. I guess I don't even want to get into that, but it's somehow triggers a DNA reaction or an RNA reaction in your body that somehow strengthens your immune system against these viruses. I don't know enough about it to really comment on it. So when you look here, so a lot of people have said that they haven't even been able to like isolate COVID in a lab. That is not true. It has been completely isolated and purified, and that is how these various teams came about determining that the genome sequence actually did contain spliced in proteins. So when you look at what was actually spliced in, what was spliced in are these like red and orange and yellow and green blobs kind of at the ends, because those are the receptors. Those are what bind to human chromosomes. And so that is kind of how the virus propagates. It injects its genetic material into a host genetic material. And that's kind of how it spreads. Like I said, I'm not a doctor. I'm probably saying a whole bunch of this wrong, but you get the point. So the part of the coronavirus that makes it easier to adapt to human beings is what they spliced in, and the receptors they spliced in are specifically from HIV 1, 2, 3, and SIV. This was actually acknowledged. There's a bunch of articles where you can see that it was acknowledged by Forbes and a couple other news organizations. You don't really hear much about that when they talk about the vaccine or how many people died from coronavirus, or they don't differentiate between the strains. At this point, it has mutated a lot. They found over 30 variations in coronavirus, and that kind of makes sense as per some of the statements made by Luc Montagnier, who we'll get into later on.
Yeah, and I just want to address a couple of comments from the chat there, saying that we're perpetuating a hoax. I mean, a huge part of this, you need to understand, is a psychological operation. I mean, no, there are not as many people dying as they're talking about. They're skewing the numbers. Everything about this is wrong. There's so much that misinformation, disinformation about this.
And so, also, yes, there's a reason. There's a very specific reason why it seemed as though the death numbers in the beginning were high and now they're next to nothing. And I'll get to that. And that completely coincides with these studies. So coronavirus strain from Washington State was one of the earliest and most potent found, and it's in Utah. Yeah, that was the first strain to hit the U.S. did come from Washington. They did end up finding 2 different strains in Washington and found how they mutated from one to another. And I'll say again, there's a very good reason for why, even though that this is very real and this is absolutely made in a lab, why the death rate is next to nothing these days. completely corresponds with statements made by some of these researchers, which I will get to. Okay, next. This paper was the one that really caught a lot of people's attention because Jean-Claude Perez, I guess, is a big shot. Look at his resume beneath, PhD in maths and computer science, Bordeaux, retired interdisciplinary researcher, IBM Emeritus, IBM European Research Center on Artificial Intelligence. So this guy is like reputable. He knows what he's talking about, and his group performed these experiments in the laboratory. All right, so the main result of this updated release is the formal proof that 2019 nCoV coronavirus is partially a synthetic genome. We proof the concentration in a small region of Wuhan new genome of 3 different regions from HIV-1 envelope gene and 3 others from HIV-2 and SIV. All this is remarkable and bears the mask of a desire for organization of a human nature, logic, and symmetries. In this article, we demonstrate also that there is a kind of global human host adaptation strategy of SARS viruses, as well as strategy of global evolution of the genomes of the different strains of SARS, which have emerged mainly in China between 2003 and the last 2019 COVID-19 Wuhan seafood market pneumonia virus isolate complete genome. This global strategy, this temporal link, is materialized in our demonstration by highlighting stationary numerical waves controlling the entire sequence of their genomes. Curiously, these digital waves characterizing the 9 SARS genomes studied here are characteristic whole numbers, the Fibonacci numbers, omnipresent in the forms of nature, and which our research for several decades has shown strong links with the proportions of nucleotides in DNA. Here we demonstrate that the complexity and fractal multiplicity of these Fibonacci numerical waves increases over the years of the emergence of new SARS strains. We suggest that this increase in the overall organization of the SARS genomes over the years reflects a better adaptation of SARS genomes to the human host. The question of a link with pathogenicity remains open. However, we believe that this overall strategy for the evolution of the SARS genomes ensures greater unity, consistency, and integrity of the genome. Finally, we ask ourselves the question of possible artificial origin of this genome, in particular because of the fragments of HIV-1, HIV-2, and SIV.
And I also want to address one more thing from the chat, that yes, I 100% agree that this is a PSYOP. It's a psychological operation, yes, but there's many facets to it. It's
let me see if I can
layered
explain this.
And there's so much to it.
People are latching on to like individual aspects of this thing and they're thinking that's the big picture. It's not. There's multiple things going on here. First off, when you look at the research presented by these researchers, and then you go back and you look at the death counts connecting to last year's flu season, right? They suddenly cut off flu deaths. And so the death numbers that they attributed to COVID in the beginning were obviously a combination of 2 things. There were a combination of people really getting screwed up by this thing because in the beginning it was virulent. But they also combined with that the influenza numbers post April 4th, right? Because influenza goes really all the way until August. They stopped reporting April 4th. You can count on the fact that all of those additional deaths from influenza were lumped in with whatever people were actually dying from these mutations or lab-produced viruses, okay? But like I said before, there is a very good reason as to why this thing is no longer killing people and how that they are really what they're doing is they're continuing to mask these deaths with by the flu as COVID, okay? So that's why they're going off on this tirade saying that the numbers are increasing, we got to have more lockdowns, because what they're doing is they've rolled the flu numbers over into COVID numbers. They've rebranded the flu as COVID-19. They're no longer collecting influenza data at the CDC. It is all COVID-19, right? So you have multiple aspects here, and they're covering for the lack of deaths from this actual viral, whatever it is, made in a lab, which isn't killing people anymore for good reason. And they're hiding that behind the flu deaths, okay? So that's what's really happening. It's not one or the other. It's not black and white. There's a lot of shades of gray here.
Yeah, and on top of that, we got the media spreading total disinformation and fear and all kinds of bullshit that's confusing everybody.
This has absolutely no impact on whether or not the tests are bogus, because the tests are all bogus. So it's not one or the other, right? There's many different things going on here. This is the chart of evolution that was laid out by this second group of researchers, indicating that there were 3 separate strains of Wuhan pneumonia, as it was labeled at the time, now all being called CoV-2, which is very disingenuous. This is their demonstration that there were 3 genomes and how different they are, but they are all identical in length, okay? So that means they were 3 separate lab creations, and probably had 3 very different effects on people when it got into their system. So these are the 9 analyzed genomes: SARS 2003, 2004, 2004B, 2012, 2015, 2017. And these are the 3 strains of Wuhan seafood market pneumonia virus isolate, otherwise known as NCOV, 2019 NCOV. They are doing a lot of like gymnastics with the terminology on the news, calling everything coronavirus. It's very disingenuous, but it does make their transition from the flu to COVID-19 that much easier, because technically they're not lying. But here you can see there were 3 definitive genomes mapped out for the 3 initial coronaviruses. Now, what I think is happening with the testing is they know the testing is bullshit. They're running tests at 40 to 45 cycles for PCR. They know they're like worthless above 35, really above 20, 25, they're worthless. So they're designing these tests to trigger false positives. And even with their false positives, they're still only hitting like 6% of tests. So, all right, so geneticists find that when analyzing the evolution of viruses, their evolution demonstrates patterns that follow the Fibonacci sequence. The Fibonacci sequence is a series of numbers: 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34. The next number is found by adding up the 2 numbers before it. I think you guys get the point. Nature demonstrates this pattern everywhere. And in analyzing the evolution of viruses, researchers have found this pattern embedded in the patterns of evolution as well. We introduce here a method of global analysis of the roughness or fractal texture of the DNA sequences at the chromosome scale. To do this, we generalize the method of numerical analysis of the master code of biology. Thus, we restructure sequences to different generic sequences based on metacodons, no longer triplets of 3 nucleotides, but values ranging from 17 to 377, i.e. 360 simulations. This method of analysis will then reveal, in most cases, discrete waves or interferences, most often dissonances. However, sometimes there will emerge kinds of resonances where all scales of analysis appear to be in symbiosis. Okay, so that's what they're looking for. They're looking for these moments where at certain frequencies, when they're hit with sound at certain frequencies, they kind of oscillate in this symbiosis. And I believe I have a couple images from their tests in here, but let me go ahead and read this to you. In 2 and 5, authors show that there is no doubt that 2019 NCOV is a novel unknown sequence. In an informal draft, Dr. Lyons-Weiler even suggests that a region between the bases 21,600 and 22,350 BP would be completely new. Considering that this region could be foreign to the family of coronaviruses, we tried to test how its absence could have had an impact on the waves that we reveal here. We then construct a hypothetical genome which would no longer have this insertion between the bases 21,600 and 22,350. It then appears for the first time that a Fibonacci wave of 34 BP. This genome would therefore be structured by a fractal nesting of 5 Fibonacci waves: 5, 8, 13, 21, and now 34. Curiously, we have only encountered such a level of organization in the entire human chromosome. A new question: can there be some kind of affinity between waves of a retrovirus and the human host genome in which this retrovirus could integrate? So basically what they found was that when they removed the section between 21,600 and 22,350 that was spliced in, that a new identification of a Fibonacci wave at the 34 BP frequency was then picked up, right? So when they removed the section of spliced in DNA, it returned to a more natural state, thereby demonstrating the appropriate Fibonacci waves, right? So that's just even more evidence that these these sequences of HIV were spliced in and not natural.
That the whole thing is unnatural. I mean,
Yes.
the whole this COVID-19 20 whatever you want to call it, the
Right,
whole
and the implications are, and this team, they also found HIV spliced into the original 2003 SARS genome. So there's a pretty goddamn good likelihood that all of these SARS and MERS viruses were all lab created, all of them. Okay, so this is the SARS 2003 and 2004, and this is the chart showing the Fibonacci stationary waves were present. 2004b, Fibonacci stationary waves present, no other fractal waves present, although anticipated. 2012 and 2015, Fibonacci stationary waves present, other fractal waves anticipated but absent as well. Hey, Zal. All right, in the sixth genome, SARS 2017, we also find three fractal Fibonacci stationary waves, 5, 8, and 13. Meanwhile, the fourth other fractal wave, 21, remains absent. So it should be there, it is not there. And this is based on their hypothetical evolution genome, deleting the region that is present in that particular sequence. They anticipate a return to all normal Fibonacci fractal waves, which more indication that these artificial insertions were placed there and they're not organic in nature. Okay, so symbiosis strategy by complementarity. Example of HIV more frequently integrating chromosomes 20, 16, 17, 22, and 19. These chromosomes have a poor HGO, or human genome optimum ratio. It will be slightly improved by the integration of the virus. Indeed, in 8 and 46, we demonstrated why the permeability to the integration of retrovirus in each of our chromosomes is correlated with this classification, and there's a link to that classification. For example, chromosomes 20, 16, 17, 22, and 19 are very permeable. This table shows that they are located at the bottom of this table of classification of HGOs of 24 human chromosomes. So basically what they're saying is that certain chromosomes are weaker and others are stronger in as far as their ability to bind with other entities like viruses. Two, symbiosis strategy by wave agreement resemblance. This could be the case of the coronavirus, which would integrate by a kind of harmonic agreement to chromosomes 4 or 13, located at the beginning of the HGO table, which have, like it, Fibonacci waves. This would hardly affect the resulting HGO ratio or even strengthen it. This is surely the case with retrotransposons. Finally, we have recognized here two laws of symbiosis of nature. Agreement because very different, and agreement because very similar. Strategies that we find up to the affinities between humans. If the genome of the 2019 nCoV retrovirus has adopted this second strategy of integration into the human genome, this could explain the fact observed at the beginning of 2020. A moderately pathogenic virus, but which spreads very quickly because its retrovirus would be judiciously adapted to its supposed host chromosome of the human genome. So basically what they're saying there is that this thing moved really quickly because it was designed to move really quickly and bind easily with the receptors on chromosomes 4 and 13.
Man, this is just my opinion, but when I look back at this and say that all of these viruses were in some way engineered, it seems like they're trying to somewhat alter human DNA. They're trying to alter what we are as humans over time. And it comes pretty evident when you look back at the big picture of everything as to what they're doing. And the question is why are they trying to make us different human beings? I mean, we've already seen the damage it's done to most people. Most people aren't healthy at all, but we've got all these things on top of it that they're engineering to try and further change the human DNA. It just seems that's just what it looks like to me when I look at it from an outside angle.
Well, the thing about this vaccine is that it's a vaccine. It's a type of vaccine that has been theorized and kind of like pondered over for many, many years. It's never been actually rolled out before. They're considered mRNA vaccines. I'm not educated enough to really tell you what they do. But much like a virus kind of injects its own genetic material into yours, you don't become a virus because of it. The vaccine supposedly does the same thing. I really don't know enough about it. Like, I'm not a vaccine guy. I'm not going to get the vaccine. Like, fuck their vaccine. But I just don't know enough about it to really give you any kind of educated position on it. So on a possible origin of 2019 nCoV genome, it is very likely that there was human intervention in this Lions region 4 of Wuhan genome. Analysis of this region in all coronaviruses shows a 100% jump in homology for the Wuhan genomes and a 70 to 80% for the closest SARS, although there is already a trace of ENV HIV1 in the genome that we have referenced here, SARS 2003. While there is no trace of HIV-1 envelope in the region Lions-Weiler 2020 in all other SARS coronavirus genomes, indeed, we find on a mini region 3 partial regions of ENV HIV-1, which are all 3 different and from 3 different HIV-1 strains. Between these particular genomes, they have been spliced in 3 varying types of HIV-1 strain. In ENV HIV1 here, these 3 regions, while hypercompressed in Lions Wuhan, they are more widely spaced in HIV1, 394 to 1228. How to explain this concentration of 3 sequences of ENV HIV1 if not by human action? This is the conclusion of that team. And this here is Professor Luc Montagnier. He's a French Nobel Prize winner. He said in an interview on the French channel CNews Canal Group that COVID-19 virus is partially lab grown. His research showed that it contains small sequences from HIV, the AIDS virus. Winner of the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in 2008, Professor Montagnier insists that more and more researchers are coming to the same conclusion, that COVID-19 is partially lab grown. He finally says that nobody can exert any kind of pressure on him, considering his legacy and Nobel credentials. This is the man who discovered HIV. He is the first person to lay out the genetic sequence of HIV. So I think he's a little bit of an expert, and he agreed with the research that indicated that HIV was in fact spliced into these various COV2 genomes. So now here's the thing. If you go and you watch, it's on BitChute and all over the place. Luc Montagnier, if you watch that actual interview, the whole thing, it's about 30 minutes, it's subtitled. He clearly states that nature does not like it when you mess with it. And so in the beginning, when this thing was seemingly unstoppable and people were actually dying from it, if you listen to some of the testimonies of people who got this really early on, the symptoms were not cold symptoms. They were not flu symptoms. They were pretty insane and and over a wide range. And the reason for that is because the coronavirus itself is attempting to shed the spliced in nucleotides and mutating. The only way that you can explain how fast this thing is mutating and to result in 30 or 40 strains of COV2 is because it is on an accelerated rate trying to shed itself of those additional nucleotides that are spliced in. And therefore, by now, COVID has pretty much completely destroyed itself in the process. So ultimately, that was his conclusion, that this thing will burn out and that it will destroy itself because nature doesn't like it when you fuck with it.
And that's pretty much the point we've reached now, yet they're still perpetuating it.
Right, and how they're perpetuating it is because now they're incorporating genuine influenza numbers. They're no longer testing for the flu. They're no longer logging flu numbers. And so what originally started out as this crazy fucking Frankenstein virus, which I've come to the conclusion is very real, that thing is dead. That thing is not killing anybody anymore. And they are masking that with these influenza numbers, right? So when you look at the beginning, they tried to say that it was just like influenza, you had all the symptoms, but no. If you had some of the weird symptoms like attacking your heart and the decreased circulation, you didn't get sick. If you got the loss of taste and smell, you didn't get sick. So there were no influenza-related symptoms. Now it's all influenza-related symptoms. But they're trying to do I don't want to get off on a tangent on testing, but they're trying to get all these people who are not sick to get tested. It's ridiculous. influenza in 70 plus years, they've never found that asymptomatic people were able to transmit influenza. So this is the exact same thing. It's all lies. The numbers are completely fabricated. They're saying that the flu is gone, pretty much down 98%. However, if you go and you look at the list of comorbidities this year for COVID-19, you're looking at almost 100,000 influenza deaths rolled into the numbers as comorbidities, right? So the numbers are being faked. The tests don't work. PCR testing is a joke for diagnosing an active infection. They're finding the antigen tests aren't working. The antibody tests, they say they could have shown whether or not you had a past infection. But no, if you had a flu shot, you're getting tested positive on that thing as well. So yes, there are multiple things going on here.
I highly recommend also go back and watch one of our previous Forbidden News updates where we did a presentation about the masks and how not only are they not effective, but they can make everything even much worse. And I've seen more people walking down the street alone or in a rural area since we've arrived in our new location than ever before, and it is making me insane. And I don't know what else to say about that. That's just crazy.
Masks are making people sick. When the CDC did a random study of people who had filled out, the COVID questionnaire and they were shown positive via tests or whatever, 70% of the random pool that they chose had always worn masks and were sick. And people who never wore a mask made up only 6% of that random pool. So the indication is that not wearing a mask is going to keep you safer than wearing a mask will. There's nothing about this thing that isn't an active psychological warfare campaign geared towards us, geared at shaping our behaviors, geared at getting us used to less freedoms. No, sorry.
Yeah, staying at home and not leaving the house, not gathering anymore, all this kind of bullshit.
Right. So I've consolidated a lot of my information onto a website I built here for Colorado. It's called savecolorado.org. Now, while it is geared towards taking on the governor and all of these liars who are governing the state, the repository of information there pretty much applies everywhere. They're faking the numbers in the same methods everywhere. So savecolorado.org, go check it out. I've got all kinds of good information on there on this pseudo campaign or pseudo pandemic, as hopefully it will one day come to be known.
Yes, and if you live in Colorado and you'd like to help in any way, have any information, anything to contribute, please email us forbiddenknowledgenews@gmail.com, and we'll get to it as soon as we can, because we're going to need as much help as we can getting ourselves out of this bullshit as possible, because we got a rocky future ahead, and I think we got to start doing something as soon as possible.
Yes, but just know nothing they're telling us is true. Do not get vaccinated. The flu's been around for 72 years, and it has at most a 30 to 40% effective rate. It is, these things, they just don't help, really, and they increase your chances of getting sick.
Right. And that is going to be one of the next things that they're going to start pushing is not only the mandatory testing, but the vaccines. And they're going to put restrictions on you, of course, if you don't get the vaccines. They're already talking about mandatory travel restrictions. So we've got a lot to look at, and a lot coming down the pipe that we need to start fighting against and making our voices heard against. Cory, do you have any other final thoughts before we close out today?
No, that's about it.
All right. Well, tonight, tune in. We have a new episode of Forbidden Knowledge News. My guest is Ian Wilson. We're going to be talking about dreams. We're going to be talking about lucid dreaming. So be sure and tune into that tonight. Until next time, everyone, you have a great evening.